Hello and welcome to this episode of the Hello Firstname podcast, Season 2. My name is Rasmus Hårlin, author of the book Hello Firstname, and the theme of this season is how to solve the content crisis for personalization. Let's dive in.
Hello everybody and welcome to another episode of the Hello Firstname podcast. In this Season 2 of the podcast, we are exploring the CX layers, namely how the content layer and the data layer eventually feeds into the personalization layer and how that all plays out. So more about that in the show notes, and you can watch old episodes as well, where we are going more in depth with this. So this week, I'm welcoming a dear friend of mine, David Mannheim. David, welcome back, maybe even.
Welcome back. Have you ever had a second-time guest on the show?
No, I think that's a first, actually. Yeah, you should be very proud. But
Is
I just
there a trophy?
Yeah, there's a trophy. Yeah. Yeah. So if you come here to Copenhagen, I'll take you watch Manchester United get the beat out of them. Again, if you like.
Yeah, no, the full one time's enough for me. Thank you.
Anyway, there's a good reason, I think, for bringing you on the show again. I mean, first of all, for the audience, David and I met when we were both doing our books on personalization. David wrote The Person in Personalization, which is a great achievement in itself and a very, very big recommendation from my side in that direction. And we eventually chose to actually write each other's forward for the book that we did, obviously mine being Hello Firstname, which I'm currently updating, as everybody should be aware of now, because so much has happened with generative AI, and a lot of stuff has happened also in your end. You launched Made with Intent.
Yes, I decided against updating my book because, well, I decided to launch a business instead.
Yeah, well, that's how some do it. That's secretly mocking me.
No, I think actually updating your book is probably much harder than launching another business.
I don't know. Yeah, it's a big one, that's for sure, because so much has happened.
Yeah, well, even last week, right?
Come again?
Even just last week.
Even just last week, yeah. So more on that later. So maybe tell the audience, because they may not be that familiar with you as I am. Tell them a bit about your background and how you came to found Made with Intent and what sparked the idea and such.
Yeah, sure. So I started a conversion rate optimization agency by accident in 2015.
Happens all the time.
Yeah, well, it kind of does. You know, you're a freelancer, you get some clients, you naively think, oh, let's hire to help the clients. Then just more becomes more. I ended up selling that in 2021 to a media conglomerate called Brain Labs. Took a couple of years off, at which point I wrote my book. A small thing called COVID happened. Yeah. And from the book and a few passions and something that's been bubbling around in my gut for a while, came this idea of intent, of understanding somebody's intent. Mm-hmm. We launched a few hypotheses to see if it was even achievable. Could you discern somebody's intent online?
On the website, that is.
Yes, yeah. And the answer is yes. So so we launched Made with Intent in 2022. It was only 2 years ago.
Yeah, time flies.
Yeah,
it's 3 years ago, 2022. By the way.
Well, yeah, 2020. I don't know, late 22. So I only really classify it as 2 years. Time does fly though.
Yeah, for sure. And Made with Intent is then which kind of company? So it's a CRO company, or is it not? Or is it
no, sorry, yeah, that's probably a good distinction, isn't it? No, we're a software company. So we help retailers, e-commerce, understand the intent of their audience. You know, are they likely to purchase? What are they feeling? What's their mindset? Are they trending in a positive direction or a negative direction? Are they interested in X, Y, or Z? And we take that data and we allow you to activate on that data, to target that data, or to push it into your current tech stack to be ingrained in your day-to-day workflow.
Yeah, so basically, I mean, you can add to the data layer all kinds of extra insights that you can cook up from how people are reacting or acting on the website. Yeah. And ultimately, you can choose to act on that either through doing outbound communications through your CRM or whatnot, or you can immediately optimize the on-site experience, so to speak.
Yeah, that word immediately is probably the most important. It is real time. It is literally every 50 to 70 milliseconds. Your scores, your attributes, your data points are updated within the data layer. So we can tell you, again, like, are you trending in a positive direction? Are you just browsing? Do you have a high level intent, or do you have a low intent to exit? So you're in a focus state. Imagine being able to know that in real time, what the user is feeling, what's going through their mind. That's the perfect, for me, that is personalization perfection, because it's true context. I'm sure you'll challenge me on that statement later.
I think it's definitely one form of personalization. Let's pause with let's focusing in on the intent concept here, because recently you guys at Made with Intent published the intent gap report,
Yes,
which I really found interesting and still
thank
do.
you.
Can you tell me what is the intent gap and why is it such a central challenge for e-commerce today?
So the intent gap is I feel like there's this digital disconnect between the experiences people want and the experiences they get. This is what we just coined the intent gap, the gap between what it is somebody wants, feels, needs, and what it is that they receive. I mean, the crudest version of this is the famous pop-up that gets shoved in your face as soon as you land on any website.
Immediately.
Ever.
Boom.
Exactly. It's like
I already signed up, for Christ's sake.
It's trying to have sex with somebody on the first date, though, isn't it? And don't you find it fascinating how in 2025 we've arrived at a place where we feel the need to do this? We know full well, if we just step back for 1 second, that this type of behavior and communication isn't, it's not acceptable. It's not appropriate, right? It is inappropriate.
It's not something you do in real life, that's for sure.
Well, you could relate it quite easily, Rasmus, to walking in a store and immediately bombarded. Have you ever watched Wreck-It Ralph? The second one, Ralph Breaks the Internet. There is a very funny scene. So Ralph, the main character, the protagonist, he goes into the internet and immediately gets bombarded with all these, they're ads, not pop-ups, all these ads of like, hey, would you like some Viagra? It's a kids program, so they didn't actually use that as an example. But I think it's such a common state of where we are, and I don't understand how it is that we've arrived here. So what we did is we commissioned a unique piece of research. We interviewed, surveyed over 2,000 customers in the UK that are designed to be representative of the UK population. We utilized Made with Intent data, our own intent data, and we did a heuristic analysis of over 100 websites, 100 retailers within the UK, to try and understand what customers actually feel when they receive this communication. And I think the results are fascinating. It's not just pop-ups, of course, it's the whole experience. Is the fact that 63% of online shoppers feel e-commerce in general are the websites that they visit are either inappropriate or manipulative.
That's such a strong word.
We didn't even utilize that word manipulative. We did a whole load of qual research, and that's the word that people were using. So we baked that into the survey.
Why are brands missing this, Mark? I mean, they have all the data in the world, you'd think. Why are they missing? Why are they coming across as being manipulative or inappropriate?
So I think it's it's my hypothesis. I don't know what you think, but I think it's this feeling that more needs to be more. That the more pop-ups, real estate, opportunities we have to communicate with a customer, we take and capitalize that. We fear that they won't purchase in the first session. We need to capture them.
Yeah, in case they do, we totally don't want to miss it. Maybe that's more like it. And in case they not really ready to buy it, let's put on the pop-up, because then we'd catch them later, and we'd like to not buy them on other people's media. We'd really like to reach them with own media.
Well, exactly. I feel as though I feel that's reason one, and I feel reason two is how we currently measure things in real life reflects our behavior.
Totally.
So for example, we measure things based on conversion rate, a figure that is, let's be honest, it's aggregated. It's an average of averages. It's binary. You do or you don't convert.
And it's very small.
Well, it's always 2% in
Yeah.
e-commerce. It's always 2%. It's quite funny that it's always 2%. So we try and optimize for this metric, right? And what ends up happening is that you end up gamifying your behaviors to optimize for that metric.
Yeah.
I mean, in other words, think of the weekly trade meeting. You come in, you sit down, you're like, conversion rate is down week on week. What do we do? There's only one thing that you can do to increase conversion rate so quickly. What do you think that is, Rasmus?
Lower prices.
Discount.
Of course. Yeah.
It's why that we see discount behavior with people like, I don't know, furniture retailers or car
That's the
salespeople.
beginning of the discount death spiral.
Yeah, it's a race to the bottom. So yeah, I think the two reasons are this fear or this absurdity that more is more, when in fact the opposite is true. And I feel like we optimize for the wrong metric. We optimize for a conversion rate, which creates and instills the wrong behavior.
I think there's a game of sort of short term versus long term, because say that you put up the pop-up for every single visitor that comes into your website. That will give you more email conversions, email signups right there and then. Could you optimize it to make it better so that it wasn't quite as annoying for everybody? Yes, you could do that. Do you consider that the best optimization point right now, or would you rather go on to doing something else?
Yeah.
Then if you're still chasing the short-term conversion, you'll be going on to do something else instead of fine-tuning how that pop-up works. And if you so do, you'll be maybe again chasing short-term, but you'll be lagging the idea of optimizing the long-term customer relationship, which is really about how will this make people feel? Because showing that pop-up to everybody surely will be annoying for a lot of people, and it will punish your long-time customer lifetime value for sure. But you don't see that if you're only focused on the short-term metrics. That's how I get.
Well, that's exactly right. There's a famous quote from Todd Yellin, the ex-VP of product at Netflix, and he spoke about cancellation. And he said we could always do what most people do. I've got a few stories on this if you're interested. That awful
Netflix anecdotes.
Let's add friction to a cancellation process. One of those stories is, personally, I only found out recently that I had a subscription to The Telegraph in the UK. Now, bear in mind, Rasmus, I'm a millennial, and I just found out I've been paying £30 a month for this Telegraph subscription for the past two years. Don't tell my wife. At least it's not OnlyFans or something, right?
Promise to keep the podcast a secret.
And to cancel that subscription, what they do is they make you phone them up. I'm a millennial. I don't do phone calls.
The world of you cannot get out of.
Well, exactly. There's another famous example, which I think is quite.
I think it's even against the law, to be honest, because there's some new legislation on that topic that you need at least like a 2-click unsubscribe.
Two-click? I've never heard of that.
Yeah. So I learned that from my previous podcast with Tom Burrell.
Oh wow.
There's actually some new legislation on this, because actually you don't want. I mean, it's totally unfair. You have to jump through hoops and stuff in order to get rid of a subscription that you didn't realize you had for 2 years and you haven't been using.
Exactly. So that's an example of short-term adding friction to optimize short-term metrics. Yeah. Netflix do the opposite. Netflix appreciate that you can add, because I'll never now shop with the Telegraph again, right? I'll never read a piece of their content or subscribe to them. So Netflix understood, and Todd Yellin said this over 10 years ago, Netflix understood that it might impact your or gamify your short-term metrics, but you want to improve your long-term metrics, your brand, your trust, your reputation. And those things, the problem is, those things are infallible, they're intangible. You can't attribute them. So people often optimize what is easy and what you can tangibly see, rather than potentially what's right or what's long-term. You ever heard of Peter Drucker, the management consultant, the US management consultant and author? He spoke about this 54 years ago. He spoke about you measure what is managed, even if it's pointless to manage or measure it. Yeah, sure.
Yeah, get what you measure.
Exactly.
All right. So one thing that stood out, or has stood out for a while actually, in all the communications that you're doing, and indeed also in the report, the intent gap, is that pages do not equal buying stages. The whole thing, pages versus stages.
Yeah.
Could you comment on that a bit and talk about how you see that's different from like a conventional CRO?
Yeah. So conventional CRO, again, you optimize for what you measure. So if you measure based on conversion rate, you optimize for that behavior. How can we optimize for increasing conversion? What we generally do is that we make we optimize the aggregate metric, so everything before it is also aggregated. So homepage, PLP, PDP, basket, and checkout, usually 5 core templates, pages. And I would just question whether we actually optimize for conversion or whether we optimize for pages. So do we improve a user experience or do we improve a page experience? Slightly more conceptual, probably something that we need to talk about over a drink.
Yeah, I think I get it. So I think most CRM people would find that more, they would take that more for granted. So they would have sort of this life cycle perspective on, okay, so where's the customer right now and the customer journey, and thus which kind of content, which message would be relevant for them. But somehow that got lost when we're working with on-site CRO.
It does, doesn't it?
And because I remember you telling me about this even a few years ago, and I couldn't really figure out why is that news? Why is that something special? And then I've come to learn like the whole CRO tradition where people are, maybe carrying the title of customer experience manager, but really they're not optimizing the customer experience. They're optimizing the pages. Yeah. So it's the page experience manager. They're optimizing it at an average level, and not for the specific customer, but for the general average John that comes on there.
Yeah, it is a crude way to look at it, but I think that if you break it down, there are definitely senses of truth in it. So we often say at Made with Intent that you should be optimizing for stages, not pages.
Yeah.
For one, it rhymes. But for two, just because a user is on a PDP does not mean they're evaluating a product. Just because a user is at a PLP does not mean they're browsing for products, right? So if you take those 5 core templates of homepage, PLP, PDP, basket, and checkout,
product landing page, product category page, product details page.
Same, you got it. But you actually think, well, what are the buying stages that users go through, the mental model that they go through to make a purchase? And look, there are thousands out there. There's, like the ADA model of attention, interest, desire, action. And there's a ton of others. We have our own, and it's just browsing, refining, evaluating, deciding, and committing. It doesn't have a fancy acronym, but it's buying stages that translate to how a user actually makes a purchase. And here are some stats for you, right? Did you know that 62% of all users on a product page are still browsing? Think about that for a second. 62% of all users on a product page are still browsing.
The microphone has gone lazy there.
Sorry, yes, it goes quite limp. How do we currently optimize for our product pages? We optimize them assuming that a user is evaluating that product. But if the vast majority of users are browsing, surely we should be pushing things more like breadcrumbs, navigation elements, recommendations. We should be optimizing for the stage that the user is at, not the page that they are on.
Yeah, so regardless on what page they're on, you'd either choose to show or hide specific functionality that matches their stage rather than putting something permanently on that page.
Or prioritize it. It doesn't have to be a show and a hide. It's not about creating pages based on the stage that the user's at. It's supporting them in whatever stage that they're at to progress them to the next stage.
Yeah.
That's the important.
That makes sense in so many ways. Why hasn't this been? Has this suddenly come up now? Why is this suddenly a new thing? Why hasn't this been like that before? That's because of the short-term metrics, or I mean, it sounds so obvious when you're putting it up.
Doesn't it? I know, and catchy as well.
Indeed.
I just think oversight is definitely part of it. We're just entrenched in a way of working is another part. It's hard to do. Conceptually, it's hard to think of. How do you? It's very easily and understood and widely accessible to break down a website into constituent or page templates. It's how we build the website. Therefore, it should be how we optimize the website. And I do understand that, but I feel as though we need to challenge ourselves in order to differentiate ourselves. So it's a combination of a multitude of different factors, I think.
Right, let's move on. You know, David, that I love a good framework. That's what I do basically. So let's talk the CX layers.
Yes.
I know you had a bit of time this morning, maybe even to look at the model. Where do you see Made with Intent fitting into this model?
Where? So you've got your content layer, your data layer, and your personalization layer.
Yes.
I actually think, I know you think it might be in the personalization layer, and I do see senses of that. I actually think it's in the data layer.
Yeah.
Because I think what we're doing is we're adding context. That's all we're doing. We are taking your minutiae of behavior and giving that meaning. So if you, I don't know, if
you're collecting data, you're actually also modeling data.
Well, that's one of your parts within the data layer, isn't it?
One of the phases,
one of your modules, yeah. So yeah, it's all we're doing is we're modeling nuanced behavior and turning that into meaning. You know, whether somebody is focused, whether they are browsing, all those things that I mentioned before.
Turning data into insights, basically.
Yeah, I would say so. I mean, you could question what is an insight, but yeah. So I mean, we just generally use the word context. I mean, you tell me the context that we currently have on customers. Do you think it's enough? Do you think more data is better?
I don't think it's ever enough. So the way that I see it is that we're capturing data, and data that is actionable, I would call that insight. So that means that you can indeed collect a lot of data and data points, but before you present it in a way that enables the marketer to act differently or in a personalized fashion, or just to make like a bigger decision on to do or to not do something. Unless we're able to do that, then it's just data. And having the biggest data lake in the world won't save you unless you're really trying to get some insights from that. Sometimes one specific data point can be the equal of an insight. So you have someone who has a lot of visits to the cancellation page on the Telegraph, for instance. That's an insight almost in itself. You don't need a really, really big sort of predictive prescriptive model to work that out for you. The data point is an insight in itself.
Yeah.
But other times, and I know some of the things that you've been telling me about what Made with Intent does. A lot of these small data points and signals as to how you scroll and how you hover with the mouse and how you browse and how long there is between switching from one page to the other. These data points don't mean anything in themselves. But when you aggregate them up in the AI models that you have, then suddenly it becomes actionable, because then you realize that someone has a 78% chance of leaving a site or whatever. For me, that's the distinction between data and insight.
Yeah, you're bang on. I mean, think of it, Rasmus, as a digital body language. I know that it's often been debunked, but you know the sentiment is true that 93% of all meaning is in non-verbal communication. So everything that I do, my hand gestures, my tone of voice, my body language, the vast majority of that is what I'm saying, what I'm meaning. What I actually say, the content, the 7% that remains, is not as meaningful as the nuanced behaviors that I'm exhibiting, because you can exhibit, I don't know, curiosity, or if I'm lying to you or whatever it might be. So the same is true online. You can infer somebody's digital body language and what it is that they're meaning and why they're doing what they're doing by their implicit behaviors.
I would question if you can really, I mean, I always say that, you can capture a lot of data and we can do our predictive models, but they're basically always, they're never completely right, because we never have, we have data points, but actually what we don't have is the context. You never know what's going on within people's lives. So I may be browsing for, I don't know, the fantastic dog food brand today, and you'd think it'd be a brilliant idea to send me an email about that tomorrow. But like during midnight, my dog died and such. It's like super irrelevant all of a sudden, even though all the data points say that, wow, this must be super, super relevant. So I'm thinking about these insights and data points as something that makes us be less wrong more of the time. So we can optimize for better, but claiming that we can really find out what's going on within people's lives or in their mind even, I think that's a stretch.
Yeah, I mean, we can't tell you if your dog's died, of course. That's like external context. But what we can tell you,
by the way, so and I don't have a dog. So.
Yeah, nor do I as well. But what we can tell you, or what I can say, is that your real world behaviors infer much more what your intent is than any past or previous behavior. So my example that I often give is, what do you do when you want a pint of milk at the supermarket? You get to the milk aisle quicker because you're more specific in your actions. So time and specificity are like two big factors within our propensity models that allow us to understand what that user is going to do. And because we use an AI agent, we're basically able to understand what everybody else has done and what their outcome is, and match those patterns and outcome together. So, and the only other thing I'd say is that it's infinitely better than what we're doing at the moment. So even if we're so on average,
totally.
anywhere between 70 and 80%, a split between accuracy and precision. But even if we were 5% better than your current 0%, I think that's still a win.
Totally. Yeah. So I'm not arguing that we shouldn't do it. It's just splitting hairs here, really. And I think the reason why it matters so much with when you're doing on-site personalization is because right now is the moment where the visitor chose to come to the website. So clearly they must be there for a reason. Whereas if you're thinking like the broader sort of CX perspective, like customer lifecycle, when they're not on the website, but they may be using your services, and we're not talking about e-commerce, then that's something different, because then obviously you'll have a less idea of what is the context right now. But if they're coming to the website for a reason, can you figure out what that reason is? I mean, it may not be entirely into their heads but if you can stand a better chance of finding out why are they here, obviously this is the time to act. And you cannot save that for later, because you'll have lost them. And you cannot even save it for later, even though you throw in that super annoying pop-up with the email address collection. But there's a moment here that's basically, I think in some ways, I think that what you're doing with Made with Intent is a bit similar to marketing automation. It's just freaking real time, because you have them right there. Now is their attention, and you don't see them every day. So if you don't act now, there's a big chance that you'll actually lose out on what is that they're after.
True. Yeah. I mean, so we're talking about context here, right? And let me explain to you the different types of intent metrics that we provide. And then you tell me whether you think that's enough context, or whether you feel like it's different than the context provided with any form of marketing automation platforms or operations, right? So the first thing that we do is we understand a user's intent stage. So think of this as what you need to do as a brand. And there are 4 stages. Do you need to engage them? Do you need to build their intent? Do you need to maintain that intent that you've already built? Or do you need to convert them? Those 4 buckets, irrespective of what page they're on, is a really good indication of the user's mindset and what you need to do as a brand.
Yeah, it makes total sense.
We then provide an intent momentum metric. So this is whether a user is focused, struggling, or abandoning. It's how they're feeling. It's what their implicit behaviors are identifying on how they're going through the website. They're feeling, basically. It's only 3 things. Then finally, we add intent metrics to that. These are prediction metrics. We have our proprietary one, XC, intent to convert. We have intent to exit, intent to progress to the next buying stage, intent to add to cart, and intent to return back to the website.
It's very fine-grained, actually.
These are things that are predictions of what might happen next. So we've got mindset, we've got feeling, and then we've got what's happening next. The final one that we collect are affinities. So this is the common definition of what intent is by Google, but what a user has an intent within. Are they interested in a specific brand, a category, a price band? That's often overlooked one. If you're looking for a holiday between £10,000 and £20,000, I know you do, Rasmus, as opposed to £2,000 and £4,000, that gives you an understanding of the intent that a user has to purchase a higher priced holiday.
Yeah.
So those are all mixed together, and they give us context. We have a segmentation framework that we put all that within to make it nice and easy and understandable. But at the end of the day, if a user has a low intent to convert and a high intent to exit, let's say, that tells you a lot about what you should be doing with that user at that particular point in time, does it not?
What would you be doing?
Well, so high intent to convert, high intent, high intent to exit. That means that you should really be understanding, well, I'm going to lose this user soon, and they're likely to buy. So I'm either going to reassure them, depending on what intent stage they're at. I'm going to reassure them with some USP messaging. I might persuade them with some form of social proof or urgency. I might even utilize a discount at that stage. If my intent to return is also low, so I have a high intent to buy, a high intent to leave, a low intent to come back to the website, that feels like your last chance saloon. So that's where discounts work best.
Yeah. Or even the email pop-up with a discount, maybe.
Yeah, it's a form of value exchange, exactly.
All right. But it sounds like the messages in this case. So I'm always distinguishing between recommendations or your content feeds would be product recommendations in the case of e-commerce, and I'm distinguishing between the message, which is then the sort of the treatment that you give, what is supposed to make people do or act differently. And I think especially when working with outbound communications, with campaigns, and with marketing automation, quite often you'll be having multiple variants of the same message. So a message could be like get back to the gym. I often use that example. So a reactivation message, you would have that in multiple versions per segment and per language and per channel. But somehow when you're working with on-site personalization, and this is a big challenge, this is essentially what I'm referring to as the content crisis. But it seems like when you're working with on-site personalization, the content crisis isn't as big as when you're working outbound. You're not producing hundreds of content variants. I don't know. Does that change how we think about content, or is it true that there isn't one such content crisis for on-site personalization?
Well, I still think there is. I just don't think we I don't think on-site is anywhere near advanced as outbound communication, CRM. And I think the reason why is a multitude of factors. It's because of what it is that we're designed to do. It's how we've been entrenched into a way of thinking. It is the fact that I know we've been beaten to death with this personalization stick of we should personalize, and never been able to do it.
No one knows what it is, or they disagree, or
definition problems. You got it.
Yeah.
But an example that we often give some of our clients is think of your USP bar right at the top. Right, you got 3 messages usually of why you should purchase, and those messages usually are free returns, free delivery, Trustpilot, something along those lines.
Bottom funnel.
You got it. Now think of if I were to give you, let's take ASOS as an example. If I were to give you 12 reasons why you should shop at ASOS, so you're going to go to the ASOS founder, and you're going to say, give me 10 or 12 reasons why we or customers should buy from you.
Yeah,
he will give you all those reasons. And they could be anything from free returns and free shipping to breadth of product and choice to the fact that they've been going for 20, 30 years, etc.
So relating very closely to sort of the core of the brand, really.
Some of them are. But if you strung all those out, Rasmus, all those reasons, and laid them against the intent stage that the user's at,
I imagine that visually, sort of,
yeah. What you'll find is that some of those messages resonate really well if you have a low level of intent, or if you're just browsing, and some of them will resonate really well if you have a high level of intent, or if you're purchasing. For example, Trustpilot, inferring trust within the brand, probably doesn't work well for users that are likely to buy. They're already past that stage. They don't need that message. But free shipping, free returns is more about the logistics of the purchase. So that works really well over there. And I think when you look at a content crisis, you can look at this need for, or this like status that we're in of static content, page orientation, page optimization, that needs to be not necessarily dynamic, but at least appropriate is the word that I often come back to. Not even relevant, appropriate.
How do you find the net list of, talking about content, what is the content that you are actually often activating or deactivating or working with if you are a client of Made with Intent? We talked about nudges, USPs, like urgency, scarcity nudges, social proof, stuff like that. What is sort of the types, and how do you get to having that net list of content that you can choose to play?
So there's like 2 categories. There's existing content and then there's new content. So existing content is anything that you have on your current site that you would change the triggering mechanism for. So take recommendations. We already have a recommendations module. We want to move that up in the page to prioritize it for users that have a low level intent and are still browsing. Good example.
Yeah.
So that's like or the email pop-up is another great example. Don't shove
Yeah.
it in people's faces as soon as they land. Wait until they engage a bit, until they've demonstrated some level of intent. Wait until their intent to exit is slightly higher. And what you will find is that the number of impressions reduces dramatically, but the number of submissions increases dramatically. Less can be more. Right. So that's an example of existing content.
Mm-hmm.
So what you're asking for is new content.
Yeah, because with the existing content, I mean, there's not much of a content crisis to that. It's stuff that you already have. And I mean, maybe you could sort of have a more static content that you have in the USPs or what the founder would say if you asked him or her.
Yeah.
But that's just probably already on your website in some form or another.
Probably. Yeah. Sometimes it's hidden, but most it's existing components, like you say. But yeah, in terms of new content, I find it interesting that we immediately go to the execution, to the solution, and that's not necessarily the case. So if we categorize things as nudges, you can utilize the MadeWithIntent platform to create campaigns that utilize templates or your own HTML. What's that? Is that a new form of code?
Maybe it is.
HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. But an execution could be a nudge. It could be a little pop-up in the right, in the top. It could be a pop-up. It could be an overlay. I hate pop-ups. It could be an overlay. It can be an interstill between a piece of content and another piece of content. For example, between the add to cart button and the delivery information. It can be, the execution can be anything. What matters is what you're trying to do, i.e., what is the context of the user and how can you progress them through their journey to support them? I think that's the real challenge. So not the execution, because we could be creative there, but the problem that you're trying to solve for. And we give. So
if I understand the problem well enough, I would realize sort of which content pieces that I'm missing.
I think so. Yes. So we give a segmentation framework and we prioritize that framework to say, okay, you probably should be focusing here because in comparison to all our other billions of events that we pass every single month, you should be focusing on this. You're underperforming in this area. And then we give coaching and content and playbooks.
And you do that with clients, or that's part of a framework that people can sort of self-explore?
Both. So the framework is on our website, MadeWithIntent.ai, but we do that with clients in terms of continuous coaching, because it is a different way of thinking. It is moving away from that page or
exactly way. Yeah. Which is always making things hard if you are trying to learn people to do something like in a transposed fashion.
Yeah, we're always lazy, aren't we? We prefer the easy way out.
Yeah. System 1, please. Yeah. I really dislike learning and system 2.
Yeah. So yeah, that's generally what we do. So think of it as existing and new, essentially.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. It sounds like that you have this framework for finding out what is the new nudges, the new sort of personalization content pieces that we should have in there.
Yeah, again, it's less the execution, which you could create yourselves, and we have a bunch of templates, but it's more the problem you're trying to solve. For example, we can tell you that if you under-index in users who we'll take the easy way out, we'll take high intent to exit, high intent to purchase. What should you do with those users?
Could you imagine those content pieces live in an outbound marketing automation email? Would those double, or how many of those are sort of online only, onsite only?
So, yes, is the answer. So we actually push data. CRM is a massive use case for us, to be fair. But we push data to the likes of a Bloomreach or a Klaviyo or an Emetria or a Braze.
Yeah, makes sense. Yeah, Intuitive would be an obvious thing to do.
And if you think of your content blocks within your email as maybe those series of USPs, that means that if you have a low intent user looking for an engagement ring, you should be talking about the types of rings that are available, like an engagement ring finder. Whereas if they have built some level of intent and they're already interested in a product, then maybe you should be talking about the finance. So think about the purpose of the user, the problem you're trying to solve, and the content that supports them solving that problem.
And that content would be the same on site as it would be in a marketing automation retargeting email, for instance.
I think
so you choose in that retargeting email to go with something that reflected sort of where was this customer. So say someone was browsing a product page a lot, and that would normally trigger some kind of retargeting. but giving the extra insights that you have with Made with Intent would help you prioritize what to talk about in this product and whether or not to show more recommendations for other products or to show how many are left, or depending on. So it's basically the same content as you show on the page, but yeah.
You got it. It's interesting. We talk about nurturing customers so much in marketing automation. In marketing automation, but we don't do that at all online.
I think quite often what the problem is with this, especially retargeting emails, is that they're so bland. I mean, we're focusing so much on getting the message out there, and not so much about sort of crafting the message to make sure that we are either talking about the USPs, or we're talking about scarcity, or we're talking about these different variants of why people could be interested in the product. I think that's a hugely undervalued thing, or I think that people generally don't get to. I got the worst ever, it just reminds me, I got the worst ever we miss you, like win back email campaign a little while back. And it was from a bakery. I'm not going to mention the name, but it's from a chain of bakeries. And they said, we miss you. Okay, so nothing about me, but they miss me. Okay, we miss you. Remember, we have bread and cakes.
Great, good for you.
That's about it. So no incentive, no taste of why I normally come there, or what could be on my mind, or whether I just misplaced the credit card that I use for having the loyalty program, whatever. So just the fact that, oh yeah, we need a win back trigger. Then people put it up and they don't give a rat's ass about what's actually in there. Sort of reminds me of that. And I feel that with the extra sort of intent insights from a platform such as yours, at least if you're having like a big ticket items or expensive purchases, really getting that purchase insanely important, because or else there's no telling when the customer will come back to the site, or at least you'd have to sort of repurchase their attention on paid media.
Well, it's context, isn't it? The bakery is missing context, and it reminds me.
They have the data, but they're not using it.
They have it. They don't use it. Yeah.
They know everything about what I normally buy, and probably they could figure out which was for my kids and what was for me, and which family pattern I was in. But they just don't bother to. I mean, either they don't have the insights calculated, or they don't bother using it.
Well, it reminds me of abandoned cart messages. So we all know, we're all savvy people, that if we leave something on our basket, at least for 24 hours, we're going to get some form of coupon code. But people abandon the cart for different reasons. You know, somebody could have just knocked at the door, or then it might need to check with their partner in order to purchase it. If you understand the reason why a user left their item in their cart, i.e. the intent of that user, is it low, is it high, is it urgent or not, then you can tailor that message accordingly. We have a client that did this, where you tailor the abandoned cart. If a user has a low level intent, the timing of which the email is sent out is much later. It's like 7 days. There's no urgency. And the message is much more about the brand rather than the product. If it's a high intent, the opposite is true. So the message will be sent within 7 hours, I think it was. And it's based on the reviews of that product to say, don't forget about this item. And what they found is that subscriptions decreased by 92%. Email engagement increased by X%, I can't quite remember. And yes, overall conversion increased. But why did email engagement increase or improve? Because the message was more appropriate to the user at that point in time.
And the timing was more appropriate as well.
Exactly.
Yeah. So I was about to ask you to share like a good use case, but I think you just did. Going back to the report, the intent, there's a stat that I loved. Showing discount codes only on exit intent.
Yeah.
113% in signups with fewer impressions. I mean,
yeah. That was an example of so that was an email exchange. But again, it's this idea of timing, which I think you alluded to just then.
Yeah.
Whereas instead of showing the pop-up, the discount code, at straight on user landing, you show it at a more appropriate time in their journey. So when they've already built intent, where their momentum decreases, where their intent to exit increases. These things that, as I'm saying them now, surely you must be thinking, that's just common sense. And it is. So the more appropriate you are, the more impact you create. The more focused, the more targeted you are, the more impact you create. It is a really simple equation that I think just gets missed in this day-to-day society that we live in of more is more.
And I mean, I often use the would you do this in real life test. So if a tactics that you're doing online would be extremely inappropriate to carry out in real life, don't do it, or do it only whenever it feels appropriate. So not on a general level, do or don't, but find out in which situations is it appropriate to ask for these things or to show these things.
Yeah.
And if that doesn't resonate, then don't do it, or take a personalized approach to it at least. But yeah, it seems so obvious when we're discussing it like this. So like two choir boys here preaching to one another. But what's stopping more companies from adopting like an intent-led personalization approach, you think?
I think most
Complexity, trust, siloed content. What is it?
I do think it's entrenched ways. I think it is more mindset orientated. I think it's perspective. I think it's this neat idea that we chase short-term metrics and we have internal pressures and that we're targeted on more is more, or we assume more is more. And I think it takes time, stepping back, reflecting on conversations like this to make you think, you know what? There is a more effective way. It's not better, it's just more effective. The more targeted you are, the more impact you create. So I feel that's the answer. Yeah, that's why I would go. And obviously, feel free to utilize Made with Intent or speak to me, and I can show you how it all works in tandem with your e-commerce strategy.
It's a brilliant platform. And full disclaimer, I also chose to invest in the platform.
You did.
So,
maybe why I'm a second-time guest. Who knows?
Maybe that's why. I didn't think you had a chance to do a proper product pitch last time, and obviously the product wasn't ready at all. But looking a bit into the future here, so how far can this go? I mean, do you envision a future where buying stage detection, becomes like a core personalization thing that you do, just like segmentation? Or I guess it is sort of segmentation.
It is segmentation. It is. That's exactly what it is. It's not even personalization, I would say. I think it's a step before that.
Yeah. So figuring out whether to show something or not show something, which also makes it. I mean, I feel at least I'm left with the feeling that the content crisis is less for on-site personalization than it is for CRM or outbound personalization. But what does that then mean for the role of generative AI? Does that mean that Gen AI doesn't have a huge role to play in on-site personalization? How do you see that?
It will do, just not yet. We did a bunch of research with 12 retailers. I know it's only 12, but they were very in-depth discussions. They were very large retailers. And the overwhelming sentiment that came from that was that there isn't the trust to give the control of content away to something that they can't. Well, they obviously can't control. And I think the larger the retailer is, certainly right now, there's more skepticism within those within AI in general, let alone generative AI.
High degree of brand control.
Yeah, so I think we've got a fair way to go personally, but I do think it'll end up there. But I think that requires trust.
What would they then sort of personalize? Would it be like the product descriptions that would be completely unique and per person?
Yeah, well, certainly. Like, interesting, whenever people focus on personalization, they really only focus on the recommendations algorithm that exists, serving the right product. But there's so much more to personalization than just find the right product.
Actually, I would give you this, David. Thanks to you, I think that a lot has happened about on-site personalization, saying that this isn't all about recommendations. So I really think you helped put that forward.
Oh, thank you. That's very kind of you. I mean, it's always been there. It's just surfacing it. So yeah, I feel like we will get there. I just think it's a matter of time. I think you really, any form of content on the site you should automatically personalize. I just don't think it'll be around. I don't think it'll be there for a good few years. I think the main reason why is it's just trust. I
think there's another reason actually. So the speed. I mean, page load time is still a thing.
Sure.
And in order to get those Google rankings, which still mean a lot, even though more traffic is coming through the LLMs. So as long as we are needing static content to be read and indexed and perform really fast, I think a lot of sort of the bulk content would still be static. And then you might add in like a small thing beneath the product that loads slightly later that puts it into perspective of the customer.
That's down. But that perspective is down to how Google currently rank for a web page. So until that changes, then also we will change how we sell
until it stops mattering.
That's fascinating, isn't it?
So what kind of content would you think, like on website personalization, would be ultimately made by Gen AI?
Why not everything? We've
website.
already got dynamic pricing. What about product imagery related to the user's use case or need?
Even envisioning it, me wearing it, if it knows I'm the one who's browsing.
Potentially. I mean, that's you've seen that around everywhere. Product descriptions is probably the most obvious one. Optimizing the title rather than showing 5,000 reviews for this product, only show the reviews that people care about. Again, Amazon are already like starting to go into that description. The same with Q&A. Like if it senses some kind of inference that senses anxiety or hesitation around a product, maybe it serves automated answers related to questions that you might already have in advance of you having those questions. I don't see why everything isn't the answer.
No, and I think you're right. I think it'll just take a while before we get there.
Mm-hmm.
There's also the idea that maybe this will all move into like being handled by agents. That maybe in the future we'll be marketing to the agents that are then browsing the website. And by the way, they don't need a visual website; they can browse through an API.
Yeah, true.
Or they'll be just hooking up with your seller agent. And whatever marketing is done is being handled by the agents before like the final say is then being taken by the customer. Actually.
Yeah, very true. Great.
Let's see. Hopefully we have at least one more year before that happens. Or maybe later I'm just mind blown with the pace that things are taking at the moment. So I think things are changing so quickly. So finishing off here, this is a question I always ask my guests here, and it's been so much fun discussing this. What's your personal favorite use case of Gen AI that you've seen recently? It can be from Made with Intent, or it can be like elsewhere.
Oh my God, I don't even know. I'm still playing around with the ChatGPT image gen stuff that got released last week.
Yeah, me too.
It's so much fun. Everybody turns everything into a Studio Ghibli kind of regen of an image for some reason. I've seen Lord of the Rings. I've seen Interstellar. That was a good one. Interstellar as a Studio Ghibli remake. That was fun. So I'm gonna go with Studio Ghibli generative AI.
Yeah.
It's a stupid answer, but it's so much fun.
And I think we shouldn't. I don't think we should be ashamed of just enjoying the fun.
Rasmus, we absolutely should. You're going to look back in 20 years and you're like, do you remember 2025 when we were pissing around with Studio Ghibli?
All right. So thank you so much for joining, David. I will not take up more of your time. I'm also conscious to keep the episodes slightly shorter than.
I've been going for ages.
So we've been going for like 50 something minutes, depending on how much we choose to edit out. No, I normally don't edit out a lot. But just to make sure that we don't miss this, where can people learn more about the intent gap report and of course with Made with Intent? You
download it directly from our website. It's been very, very popular. So MadeWithIntent.ai. We can't afford the .com, I'm sorry. And you could download it directly from there. Yeah. And that's also, I guess, if you want to see a demo of the platform or something like that, that's also... Yes, there's a nice little product demo on there, but also feel free to just reach out to me. I love showing off what we've got because I, quite biasly, I think it is a game changer. Yeah, and you should be pretty proud. All right. Thank you very much. Thank you for joining, David. It's been a huge pleasure. Thank you. And to the audience, I would say thank you for listening in on this episode once again. I think I could check the box with saying I learned something new today. So that was a huge pleasure and always a privilege, even though I detest going into system 2 and actually learning something new. Afterwards, it always feels good. So that's a bit of a psychotherapy for you here to end off the episode. So remember to subscribe to the podcast. It's normally coming out every other week, at least for the time being. So hope to see you in another episode. You've been listening to yet another episode of the Hello Firstname podcast. Remember that all models discussed in this podcast can be downloaded and are free to use. The original book, Hello Firstname, can likewise be downloaded as either the full audiobook or as a written abstract. All links are in the show notes.
podcast is brought to you by our sponsor, the omnichannel marketing automation platform Agilic. Visit www.agilic.com for more information.